Australians seem to be losing touch with a pretty basic fact that the wealth we have and all the schools and the hospitals, etc., didn't all fall out of the sky. I mean, people had to work for it, work hard, work smart. But you ever look around and see how many people now think we can keep shutting down our cities, shutting down whole industries, and we'll somehow not feel it. We won't get poorer. All that's sort of, sad enough, but I think it's tragic when you see some of this same thinking in some of our poorest communities. Now, a year and a half ago, climbing Ayers Rock, or Uluru, that was banned by local traditional owners. They decided climbing was unsafe or against sacred traditions, even though past traditional owners said it wasn't. And no surprise, tourism numbers fell, even before the coronavirus. That's money and jobs for the locals, gone. And now the other big Aboriginal tourism site in the Northern Territory could also be hit by bans. Traditional owners of Kakadu National Park, or the area there, they say they don't like the interference from the federal government. So they could close some of the park's best attractions, including Ubir, a rock formation with a spectacular view and really fascinating Aboriginal rock painting. It's the best I've ever seen. Traditional owner Jonathan Nagy has said that it's about time we started making an impact by basically shutting down the park, he said, and he's going to shut down Ubir. Well, I was joined a short while ago by Matt Cunningham, Sky News Northern Australia correspondent. Matt Cunningham, thank you so much for joining me. Why are the traditional owners threatening this?
Well, essentially, there's a disagreement between the traditional owners, Andrew, and Parks Australia. Now, this is something that has been running for quite some time. In fact, the Cunningham rock pools, which people would be very familiar with, they're the ones that you often see in postcards of Kakadu, the beautiful rock pools that fall down over another waterfall in the southern part of Kakadu. They, in fact, have been closed for more than a year after a disagreement between Parks Australia and traditional owners after Parks Australia was accused of desecrating a sacred site while they were trying to build some new walking trails. So that particular attraction has been shut for some time. Now we're hearing this talk about traditional owners threatening to close Ubir. Of course, Ubir is that beautiful spot made famous in Crocodile Dundee, where Paul Hogan was pictured sort of looking out over the escarpment. So it's a worrying situation, you would have to say. This is something that tourism operators have indeed been raising alarm bells about for quite some time. You go right back to the sort of September, October 2019. There was a meeting in Canberra. They were given a guarantee that there would be 8 sites at Kakadu that would be open for the 2020 tourism season. By late February of 2020, there was still no guarantee that they were going to be open in time. International tour bookings were shutting right down. We had a coronavirus pandemic that came and put an end to international tourism anyway, Andrew, but this was a disaster that was on the cards even if that pandemic hadn't arrived.
So you already point to something that I've noticed too. I've been to Kakadu, well, I think 3 times so far. One of the things that holds back tourism there, it seems to me, is not only perhaps that the facilities aren't as good as they could be, but that many attractions are already closed so often, roads washed out or whatever. Sometimes they seem quite arbitrary, the closures. You've just mentioned another one. That must be really holding Kakadu back.
I think there's no doubt about that. You look at Twin Falls and Jim Jim Falls, which are 2 of the main attractions at the Kakadu National Park. Now, they're usually only open for 2 or 3 months of the year. There's a really rough track that you need to drive down to get in there. A couple of years ago, and I think we've spoken about this before, Andrew, even when the road was open, often you couldn't get to Twin Falls because, the boat that operated, wasn't in service. This is at the peak tourist season of the year. We know Cunlingham's been closed now for some 12 months as well. So that's a real issue. I think the other real issue that's going to emerge and is starting to emerge in the Kakadu National Park is the state of the township of Jabiru. Now, Andrew, if you go to the township of Jabiru, it is beginning to resemble a ghost town. This is a town that was built on the back of the Ranger uranium mine in the early 1980s. If you go there now, a lot of the signage hasn't been updated, you would say, since the early 1980s. The bakery's closed down late last year. The Sports and Social Club closed closed down, and at the end of last year we saw the operation stop at the Ranger uranium mine. There's going to be a lot of pain ahead when you consider that that mine employed a lot of Aboriginal people. It was also really a sort of central business hub within Kakadu National Park and the main township within Kakadu National Park. There's been a lot of money committed to rejuvenating Jabiru, but at the moment it looks like a pretty tired and sorry place.
Yes, you had the Coronation Hill development that went nowhere because of local objections. You had Jabiru closed before it even opened because that went nowhere. I just wonder where the money's going to come from to keep the community afloat. Yeah, look, the government's meanwhile, federal government, one of the things that seems to be embittering it with a number of Aboriginal organisations, not just the Kakadu, also around Uluru and elsewhere, it seems to be demanding more accountability for money spent, money earned in some of these corporations. Has that got anything to do with what's going on?
Well, I think it's going to raise its head. And there's one thing that's happening. We talk about Jabiru and you talk about where the money's going to come from. There's more than $200 million has been committed to redeveloping Jabiru, to turning it into a tourist town. Now, that's being done in partnership between the federal government, the Northern Territory government and the Gundjeihmi Aboriginal Corporation. Now, that corporation, Andrew, has been under investigation from ORIC for issues including embezzlement for more than 12 months. So I think there's going to be some questions raised about why that particular corporation is involved in this plan that's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars to rejuvenate that township, given the cloud that's hanging over it at the moment.
Look, it's quite extraordinary, Matt. You know, you've got two of the Northern Territory's biggest draw cards sort of hampered by some of these bans. There's Uluru, of course, the rock, climbing the rock has been banned. You've now got these threats of bans and key attractions of Kakadu. Tourism operators in the Northern Territory, I mean, they've really suffered enough through all this coronavirus crisis. They can't be happy with this.
Well, I think they're absolutely tearing their hair out, and you know, Glenn Hingley from Tourism Top End has been quite vocal about this in the past. It's fascinating if you make the comparison, Andrew, between Uluru and Kakadu in particular, parks that are managed by the federal government's Parks Australia, and some of the other parks in the top end, Litchfield National Park in particular, and Nipmuc Gorge down near Katherine. Now, those two parks have been absolutely thriving over the past 10 years. At Litchfield National Park, there are new attractions that are opened every year. There's new four-wheel drive tracks that have been put in, new campgrounds that have been opened, roads that have been sealed. All of the main attractions are very accessible. You compare that to Kakadu and it's just the complete opposite situation. Things are closed all the time. Things are hard to get to. It's almost as though they're making it as difficult as possible for tourists when they go there, and that is a situation that really can't continue if we want to attract international tourists up here to the top end.
And also, if we want Aboriginal communities that have the good fortune, have these wonderful assets, to be self-sufficient and thriving economies that provide their children with lots of jobs, I would have thought that's really quite essential. But I have to say, there have been times at Kakadu when even the didgeridoo player at the Jabiru, at the Kakadu Inn down there was a white guy. I mean, this is, I think, is really very, very sad. Matt Cunningham, thank you so much indeed for your time.